This is Neranza Blount. We're really happy to have her here. Anything, that's it. Please,
Okay.
by all means.
All right. Well, welcome. This is Encaustic, which I'm going to briefly describe to the people who don't know what it is. It is beeswax. It's not candle wax. Some candles are beeswax, but it's not paraffin. It is really made by our little honeybee. And it is also, what makes it encaustic is it is combined with damar crystals, damar resin, which comes from pine sap, and that melts at a higher temperature, which gives it more durability. Okay, it dates back thousands of years. It was originally used to seal ships. Then they realized it could hold pigment, so they started painting with it. And then they started doing portraits with it. They would paint the person, and I actually tried to copy one, and I'm still working on it, but this is kind of what they look like. They would paint the person in their prime, it would hang in their home, and then it would go on their tomb. And then they could see what the person looked like in their prime, and then they could also, they said, the person could look out onto the world, continue. If you want, you can pass this around. Don't be afraid to touch it. It's fine. Just don't scratch it. So, back then, it was hard to do it. They had to put coals in sacks and swing it over to heat it. They also would heat the tools to fuse. Encaustic is very liberal. The sky is the limit, whatever your imagination is. But there are a few rules. Number one rule is it has to be applied to a rigid surface, otherwise it'll crack. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule, and I'll explain that later. The next rule is it has to be, every layer has to be fused with heat. They say, don't fuse, you lose. It will, you might think it's fused, but when the temperature change, it'll pop off. One of those layers will start lifting off. The surface also has to be absorbent. It has to be able to draw it in. That's why acrylic will not work with it. You can mix oil paints with it if you soak the oil out first by putting it on a paper towel. But really, R&F, they make the best pre-made. The colors are just so intense. All you have to do is mix it with their medium, which is also already formulated in caustic. The beeswax is mixed 1/8 damar to 8 parts beeswax. You can fudge that one way or the other, but that tends to be the best mixture of it. Okay, well, we're going to get started here. This heating palette, this is just a wonderful palette. The whole thing is heated with an element underneath. And I've got some soy wax here. Later you'll be able to try it over there yourself. And we've got it marked, the soy wax is only for cleaning your brush, or you can clean the palette with it, but don't paint with it. And then I've got some beeswax going on in their little palette cups, or you can paint just directly on here, which is what I'm going to do. Colors come in opaque, semi-opaque, semi-transparent, and transparent. And you can overlay. You can have control over the wax, but don't fall in love with it, because as soon as you put the heat to it, it's going to change. But you still can, as you start working with it, get some control on it. You can draw in lines, make straight lines, curved lines, and hold that line by inscribing and painting on top. And then scraping off and showing your line. You can treat it, put the heat on very slowly, and just fuse what you have. That's my favorite part, watching those little crystals melt and just combine. Or you can really push the heat to it and just chase it around like watercolor and just see what you get. That can be fun too. Okay, what's so good about this palette plate is that you also have the place to rest your brushes, and if you just keep the metal part on there, it keeps it warm. Before I use this, I would just put my brushes to the side, they'd cool, and then I have to lay it on my heating element and just kind of heat it up until it got pliable again. You have to work fast. Even if you have to think 20 minutes about your brush stroke, as soon as it leaves that heat, apply it. And then you only have a couple of seconds and you're done. And you have to heat it again, apply. And when you get one layer on there, wherever, fuse it. You can put two different colors side to side, but don't touch them unless you want to really mix them with your heat and don't know what you're going to get. But as soon as you put something on top, make sure that first layer has been fused. Okay, let's do something. The first thing I like to do is take my surface. Oh, R&F makes these great surfaces. They have clayboard. They have these that are coated in a gesso. It's not acrylic gesso. Don't get that mixed up. In fact, let me show you this. This is, somebody gave me this little piece of wood and I just thought it's so neat, you know. So I have put a little backing on it and I made it so I can hang it, but it was brown. In fact, it was really brown. And so here's the R&S Encaustic Gesso. And that's what you can paint. And I've only put one surface on here. I have to sand it. I need to put another and sand it, and then I'll be ready. But I wanted to bring that to you to show you as an option where you can make your own boards. R&F makes these panel boards. They also make them where they're cradled. They have like a ½ inch, 3/4 inch, 2 inch deep. They're very nice, already cradled, and very, very nice. They also make a clay board that's super smooth. All of their surfaces you can apply fine pen and ink on them. In fact, I did that with one. Here's one. I did a pen and ink drawing first. Then I started painting on it, and then this has a little example. I'm going to pass this around too. This has actual honeycomb because my husband's a beekeeper. My father's been a beekeeper all my life, and it's just natural that I discovered this way of painting. I used to paint with oils, but I'm just hooked on this.
Well, what I'm hearing is you can't use canvas.
You can use canvas if it's not primed with that acrylic gesso primer. You also have to adhere the canvas to a rigid surface.
A rigid surface.
It's got to be rigid and absorbent. Two of your rules.
Okay.
So I'll pass this around, and don't be afraid to touch it. And let me have that back. Let me have this one and this one. I wanted to show this to the camera because we're taping in 3D, by the way, and so this has a good effect when you look at it. Okay. All right. Now there you go.
What does cradled mean?
Cradled is where it has an edge. It's like a cradle, but it's sitting on top of that cradle. So then when it sits on the wall, it's going to be sitting out.
Oh.
And you have your option of just painting on the surface and letting the paint drip off. I like to paint my edges. I've glued my own on the back. In fact, you can look and see how that one is done. That one is one way. I brought many ways of showing how you can do things. Here's a good example of where I've done my own cradling. And I just see I've got particle board, anything absorbent. I go to Home Depot and go to their scrap bin and I look and I cut pieces down. But the first ones I did were so heavy. And when you apply wax, it gets heavy.